Coming up, more overtime heroics for Dougie Hamilton and an abundance of goals between the Panthers and Penguins. This is Locked On Game to Game NHL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NHL, local experts joining us every day to go over the biggest stories on the ice. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Dougie Hamilton scored the tying goal in the third period. Then he scored the game winner in overtime for the Devils against the Golden Knights on Tuesday. Our Locked On Devils host recaps the exciting win from New Jersey.
What's up? This is Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils, and here is my post-game reaction. So, the New Jersey Devils came out victorious against the Vegas Golden Knights by a score of 3-2. So, after period number one, the Devils were leading 1-0 thanks to Andre Palat. Then there was a couple bad series of events that took place in period number two that resulted in the Devils trailing 2-1. So going into the final few seconds of period number three, the Devils needed a miracle, and they got it once again. So when there was only a few seconds left of the game, they had the extra attacker on, and Dougie Hamilton went 5-hole on Thompson and was able to tie the game. And the Devils played their fourth straight OT matchup, and the Vegas Golden Knights were all over Jack Hughes, but they left Dougie Hamilton open once again. So Jack Hughes nudged it over to Hamilton, and Hamilton came up big once again. So he got the game-tying goal, and he got the game-winning goal. So Dougie Hamilton just doing what he did in the previous game against the Pittsburgh Penguins carries over into the matchup against the Vegas Golden Knights.
Patrice Bergeron scored with less than 3 minutes to play to break a 2-2 tie between the Bruins and Canadiens last night in Montreal. Locked On Bruins goes over yet another win.
It was a bit touch and go for the Boston Bruins for a while Tuesday night in Montreal because Canadiens goalie, checks notes, Sam Montembeault was standing on his head, keeping the league's best team at bay, but the black and gold came out on top eventually. This is Ian McLaren, host of Locked On Boston Bruins, and despite Montembeault's best efforts, the Bruins scored 4 goals en route to another victory here this season. It was Taylor Hall who scored his first in quite some time, dating back to mid-September, who got the Bruins on the board. That was followed by goals from David Krejci, the captain, and noted Nordique supporter Patrice Bergeron, and David Pastrnak, who capped a 4-point night with an empty net goal. Let's pay him, shall we? Catch all the latest on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
It was a fun one to watch in Pittsburgh. 13 combined goals ending in a game winner in overtime. After Pittsburgh picked up the win in a thriller, the Locked On hosts for both teams give us the recap.
The Florida Panthers on this second end of a back-to-back in a game they really had to win, losing a heartbreaker despite 13 combined goals between them and the Pittsburgh Penguins. What is up, guys? This is Armando Velez from the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, and the Florida Panthers lose to the Pittsburgh Penguins by a final score of 7-6 in overtime. And this game had everything. You had fourth line scoring for each team. You had a shorthanded goal by Aaron Ekblad. You had multiple power play goals by the Penguins, and the Panthers as well got one on the board, continuing their hot power play. Carter Verhaeghe getting 2 incredible goals, forcing Casey DeSmith out of his net. But the Panthers continue to have an inability to hold on to leads. They were up 2-0. They allowed 3 straight goals by Pittsburgh. After the first period, it was tied at 3. After the second period, it was tied at 4. And even had to claw their way back to even force overtime towards the end of regulation. Once again, thanks to Carter Verhaeghe. Colin White gets his first goal since December 11th, his first time in the lineup since January 14th. And the Panthers just lose this one in overtime. But also credit to Alex Lyon as well. His third straight start, fourth straight appearance for this team, and the Panthers get points in 3 out of their last 4 games with the situation that's going on with their goaltending. So listen to my recap of this 7-6 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Make sure to listen to my recap on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'll be bringing in Jacob Winans for this Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Your team every day.
Well, that was the wildest game of the season for the Pittsburgh Penguins to date. Hey, everyone, I'm Hunter Hodes here with the Locked On Penguins podcast, back with another Locked On Now video as the Penguins win a 7-6 thriller against the Florida Panthers tonight. We time travel back to the 1980s when scoring was higher than it is right now. There was no goaltending in this one, and in the end, the Penguins were able to get that much-needed second point in overtime to keep pace with the Eastern Conference with the NHL playoff race. They are now in the first wildcard spot due to a tiebreaker over the Washington Capitals. They will play the Capitals on Thursday, but tonight it was all about the core. Kris Letang, 2 goals, 2 assists, including the game winner. Sidney Crosby, 1 goal, 2 assists. Evgeny Malkin, 1 goal, 2 assists. Without all that production, there is no chance the Penguins come out with the victory. For more on the Pittsburgh Penguins, you can check out the Locked On Penguins podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Philly falls in overtime last night to the Kings. Locked On Flyers is in to break everything down for us.
Well, that was a frustrating way to lose a game after a tremendous sequence offensively for the Flyers, only to have it end abruptly at the other end of the ice. Hi, this is Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers with your quick reaction to the Flyers' 4-3 overtime loss to the Los Angeles Kings. Flyers had some trouble holding on to a 1-goal lead throughout the first 2 periods of the game. The Kings' dominance in faceoffs, I think, had a big part to play with their 66% win rate, especially on that Kings power play goal to tie it at 1. You could complain about that non-call with DeAngelo getting tripped at the end, but ultimately it was that lack of ability to hold the Kings and Anze Kopitar back that did them in. For more on this game and the Flyers all season long, tune in to Locked On Flyers.
Coming up, the Avs win their 6th straight. This is Locked On Game to Game NHL. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Built Bar. They are the best tasting protein bars in the market, made with 100% real chocolate. They come in dozens of different flavors. I personally like the puffs, which are made with that protein-infused marshmallow. If you head over to Built.com, you can use our promo code LOCKED15. That gets you 15% off of your order. So just put in that promo code LOCKED15 to get you 15% off of your order at Built.com. Welcome back. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. The Wild and Lightning went into the third period tied at 2 before Tampa took control late to get the 4-2 win. Locked On Wild tells us what went wrong in Tampa.
A road trip that started with promise ends with the Wild on the outside of the postseason picture. Hey everybody, Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, recapping a 4-2 loss for the Minnesota Wild to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Minnesota Wild got the opening goal in this one on a shorthanded goal by Joel Eriksson Ek, Wild's 8th shorthanded goal of the season. The Wild also got a power play goal from Kirill Kaprizov, but no even strength goals for the Wild in this one, as Corey Perry scored twice and Nikita Kucherov had the empty netter to seal it for the Minnesota Wild. And stop me if you've heard this one before. Bad penalties, inability to score at even strength doom the Wild as they fall out of the playoff picture for the first time since early in the season. For more on the Minnesota Wild, make sure you're following Locked On Wild wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Andrew Copp ending things very quickly in overtime last night and giving Detroit their win over San Jose. Locked On Sharks and Locked On Red Wings give you all the details.
The Sharks road trip struggles continue. I'm JD Young of Locked On Sharks, and the Sharks fall 3-2 in overtime to the Detroit Red Wings. James Reimer was stellar tonight and deserved better. He stopped 27 of 30 shots, including several high quality chances from the Red Wings. But in the end, a terrible face-off play that the Sharks couldn't cover leads to the overtime goal for the Red Wings. Erik Karlsson continued his dominance, scoring 2 primary assists tonight, putting him up to 64 points on the season. So I have a full breakdown of tonight's game. Talk about, of course, Timo Meier continuing to be Timo Meier on your next episode of Locked On Sharks, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well.
It certainly wasn't pretty at times, but the Red Wings bounced back after a loss to the Philadelphia Flyers and beat the San Jose Sharks at home 3-2 in overtime. Andrew Copp gets the game winner. Scotty, what'd you make of this game, man?
You know, I think we've been saying a lot this year about games where the Wings outplay their opponent, and lose, and those are really frustrating. And I think this was one of the opposite, where the Sharks, for at least 2 periods, first period was pretty close, but for the second and the third, probably outplayed the Wings, but Wings were able to put the puck in the back of the net, and obviously in overtime was kind of had the scramble in front of the net there and took advantage. So, like, I'm never going to complain after a win, but definitely not the prettiest of wins either.
Certainly not, and Philly Husso went a long way to getting that win, but we'll talk about that whole thing and break the whole game down on the Wednesday episode of Locked On Red Wings.
The Predators able to get another good performance in net, and a late goal gives them the win over Winnipeg. Locked On Predators tells you how Nashville got it done.
Well, if you needed proof the Preds and Jets hate each other, just look at this game tonight. I'm Nick Morgan from the Locked On Predators podcast. Predators beat the Winnipeg Jets 2-1 in Smashville, and it is very fitting that a game that featured some big hits, a fight, and a couple of angry hockey scrums is the Preds' own MMA fighter, Tanner Jeannot, that gets the game-winning goal. His first goal since October 27th. This was a guy that scored 24 last year. Remember, he was one of the highest scoring rookies in the entire NHL. It's been a bit of a rough season for him, but this goal tonight, a reflection of some better play from him over the past few weeks or so. So Preds get a very big win, a dominating win over a Central Division rival. They're still in the playoff hunt, folks. We'll have to stay tuned and see if they can make it.
Kim Fowler and Troy Terry each tallying 3 points last night to get the win over Arizona. Locked On Ducks is in to go over all the highlights.
The Ducks get only their 6th regulation win of the season against the Coyotes in the Battle of the Bottom Dwellers. Hi everyone, Jason JD Hernandez here from Locked On Anaheim Ducks, as Anaheim is victorious against the Phoenix Coyotes 5-2. And hey, give credit to Troy Terry, Troy Vetchkin getting 3 points on this one, including a sweet goal. And credit to Cam Fowler, 3-point night, 2-goal night for Cam Fowler. And as for the Ducks, that win puts them out of last place. So now they are not with the best odds to get Connor Bedard in the NHL draft as of right now. But hey, give credit to the Ducks for getting another big win in the desert, and an especially satisfying win against those Phoenix Coyotes. Tune into the next episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks for more on the latest games on this road trip.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NHL. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Now make sure you go subscribe to Locked On NHL and your team's Locked On podcast, both here on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.